5 schools in 2 years. Ray Sullivan heard the whisper while mopping outside the headmaster's office, his hand steady on the mop handle even as the words settled like ice in his chest. Another private academy, another mother too busy to show up. The 10-year-old sat alone in the waiting room, her patent leather shoes kicking rhythmically at a marble column, each strike echoing down the hallway like a countdown. Harlow Prescott. Even her name carried weight in this building. Daughter of Catherine Prescott, the woman who owned half the city skyline. When their eyes met across the polished floor, she didn't look away the way most kids did when they saw the janitor. She stared. At him. At the lunchbox on his cart. At the 2 portions wrapped in wax paper. Humble and out of place in a school where kids brought sushi in designer bento boxes. Ray had no idea that this moment, this simple exchange of glances over a lunchbox, would change everything he thought he understood about the distance between his world and theirs. The morning routine never changed. Ray woke at 5:30, made coffee in the same chipped mug his wife had bought at a yard sale 8 years ago, and packed 2 lunches while the city outside his apartment window was still dark. Peanut butter and jelly for Bailey, cut into triangles because she said they tasted better that way. Turkey and cheese for himself, wrapped tight in wax paper to keep it fresh until his break at noon. The lunchbox went onto his cart alongside the cleaning supplies, and by 6:15, he was pushing through the service entrance of Pinnacle Academy, where the marble floors gleamed like water under the chandelier light. The school smelled like old money and furniture polish. Ray had worked here for 3 years, ever since Bailey got the scholarship that made it possible for her to attend. Most days he was invisible, which suited him fine. He cleaned the hallways before the students arrived, restocked the bathrooms during class hours, and mopped the gym after practice let out. The routine was comfortable, predictable, the kind of work that let his mind wander while his hands stayed busy. Bailey was 8 now, small for her age, with her mother's dark eyes and his own stubborn chin. She walked to school with the other scholarship kids, the ones who lived in the neighborhoods where the buildings only had 3 floors instead of 30. Ray would see her sometimes in the hallways between classes, and she would give him a quick smile before hurrying along with her friends, careful not to draw attention to the fact that her father was the man who cleaned up after everyone else. He understood. Kids had their own social mathematics to navigate, their own delicate hierarchies. She never treated him differently at home, would climb into his lap after dinner and tell him about her day in that rapid-fire way she had, jumping from topic to topic, like a bird hopping between branches. That was enough. It was a Tuesday morning in late September when Ray first heard about Harlow Prescott. He was mopping outside Headmaster Cunningham's office, the door slightly ajar, when the voices drifted out into the hallway. 5 schools, Catherine. 5. In 2 years. Cunningham's voice carried the particular exhaustion of someone who had repeated himself too many times. The incident reports alone are thicker than our entire student handbook. She's thrown paint at her art teacher, locked a substitute in the supply closet, and last week she allegedly pushed another student into the fountain during lunch. There was a pause, then a woman's voice, cool and controlled. Allegedly. 3 students witnessed it. And what provoked her? Another pause, longer this time. That's not the point, Miss Prescott. We have rules, standards of conduct. Your daughter has made it clear that she has no intention of following them. So you're expelling her. We're recommending a transfer to a more appropriate educational environment. One better equipped to handle students with behavioral challenges. Ray kept mopping, his stroke slow and even, the only sound in the hallway the soft swish of water across marble. He had learned long ago that invisible also meant inaudible. People said things around him they would never say if they remembered he was there. She's 10 years old. The woman's voice had changed, something sharper underneath the control now. She's a child, not a behavioral challenge. Miss Prescott, I understand this is difficult, but You don't understand anything." A chair scraped against the floor. "I'll have my assistant arrange the transfer. We wouldn't want Harlow to damage Pinnacle Academy's sterling reputation." The door opened before Ray could move his cart out of the way. The woman who emerged was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ray's monthly rent. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a way that looked effortless, but wasn't, and her eyes were the pale gray of winter sky. She barely glanced at Ray as she swept past, her heels clicking against the marble like gunshots. Behind her, moving slower, was the girl. Harlow Prescott was small, smaller than Bailey, even though she was 2 years older. Her school uniform was immaculate, navy blazer, pleated skirt, knee socks pulled up precisely, but her face was a storm. Dark hair that was probably supposed to be in a neat ponytail had come half undone, curls escaping around her face. Her eyes, the same pale gray as her mother's, were red-rimmed and fierce. She looked at Ray. Really looked at him, not through him the way most people did. Her gaze dropped to the lunchbox on his cart, to the 2 portions visible through the clear plastic lid. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then closed it again and hurried after her mother, her patent leather shoes squeaking slightly against the wet floor. Ray watched them go. In the waiting room at the end of the hallway, he could see Catherine Prescott's silhouette through the frosted glass, her phone already pressed to her ear. The girl stood apart from her mother, arms wrapped around herself, staring at nothing. Something about the image stayed with Ray as he finished his rounds that morning. The girl's fierce eyes. The way she had looked at his lunchbox as if it were something foreign and fascinating. The careful distance she maintained from her own mother. As if they were strangers sharing an elevator rather than family. He thought about Bailey, how she would climb into his lap without hesitation, how she still held his hand when they walked to the corner store, even though she was getting old enough to think it was uncool. He thought about the weight of her head on his shoulder during movie nights, the way she would reach for him first when she woke from a nightmare. That night, after he picked Bailey up from after-school care, and they were eating dinner at their small kitchen table, spaghetti with meat sauce, garlic bread from the bakery down the street, he asked her about the Prescott girl. Oh, Harlow. Bailey twirled spaghetti around her fork, concentrating hard on keeping the strands from sliding off. She's in 5th grade. Everyone's kinda scared of her. Scared? Why? Bailey shrugged. She's just always angry, I guess. Gets in fights. Yells at teachers. Last week she dumped her lunch tray in the trash without eating anything, and told Mrs. Henderson that the food looked like it came from a dog bowl. She paused, considering. Mrs. Henderson cried. That wasn't very kind. No. Bailey looked up at him, her expression serious. But Samantha Reed said Harlow's parents got divorced last year, and her dad moved to London, and never calls anymore. And her mom is always working, like all the time. Samantha's mom said Catherine Prescott is married to her company, not her daughter. Ray set down his fork. That's not a nice thing to say either, Bay. I know. I'm just telling you what I heard. She went back to her spaghetti. Is Harlow leaving our school? I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. But Harlow didn't leave. Ray saw the notice on Cunningham's desk the next morning while he was emptying the trash. One more chance. Probationary status. Weekly behavior reports required. Someone had pulled strings. Someone with enough money and influence to make a headmaster reconsider his decision. The following Monday, Ray was cleaning the art room after school when he heard the crash. He found Harlow in the far corner, surrounded by overturned paint jars, her hands and uniform covered in streaks of blue and red. She was breathing hard, fists clenched at her sides, staring at the mess as if she couldn't quite believe what she had done. Ray set down his mop and approached carefully, the way you might approach a wounded animal. You okay? She didn't answer. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes bright with tears she was clearly refusing to let fall. He crouched down and started picking up the paint jars, checking each one for cracks. Most had survived the fall. The paint that had spilled was already starting to dry on the linoleum floor, a Jackson Pollock mess of primary colors. "This is going to need some elbow grease," he said conversationally. "You know what works best on acrylic paint?" Silence. Warm water and dish soap. Most people think you need some fancy chemical, but 9 times out of 10, warm water and dish soap will do the trick. He glanced up at her. "Want to help?" She stared at him, as if he had spoken in a foreign language. Ray stood and went to his cart, pulled out a bucket and 2 scrub brushes. He filled the bucket with warm water from the art room sink, added a squirt of dish soap, and brought it back to where she stood. He held out one of the brushes. She took it slowly, like it might be a trap. They worked in silence for a while, scrubbing at the paint stains. Ray showed her how to work in circles, how to apply pressure without grinding the paint deeper into the floor. The smell of soap and wet paint filled the room, and gradually the colors started to lift, swirling into the water in cloudy ribbons. "My mom's going to kill me," Harlow said finally. Her voice was small, younger than 10. "For spilling paint? For messing up again? For making her look bad?" She scrubbed harder at a particularly stubborn red streak. She had to come to school today. She had to cancel 3 meetings. She told me on the way here that this was my last chance, that if I couldn't get my act together, she was going to send me to boarding school in Switzerland. Ray kept scrubbing. "How do you feel about Switzerland?" "I don't want to go to Switzerland. I don't want to go anywhere." Her voice cracked. "I just want—" She didn't finish. The brush fell from her hand and clattered against the bucket. And then she was crying, really crying, the kind of tears that shook her whole body. She pressed her hands against her face as if she could physically hold the emotion in. But it came anyway, raw and desperate. Ray sat back on his heels. Every instinct told him to reach out, to offer comfort the way he would for Bailey. But he knew better. She wasn't his daughter. She was Catherine Prescott's daughter. And there were rules about these things, invisible lines that people like him didn't cross. So he just sat there, giving her space while staying present. He waited until the worst of it passed, until her breathing started to even out, and she lowered her hands from her face. "I'm not supposed to cry," she said, her voice thick. "Mom says crying is for people who don't know how to solve their problems." Ray thought about all the times he had cried, in the months after his wife died, the nights spent in the bathroom with the shower running so Bailey wouldn't hear, the way grief would ambush him in the middle of the grocery store or while folding laundry, sudden and overwhelming. "Your mom is wrong about that," he said quietly. "Sometimes crying is how we get strong enough to solve our problems. It's like emptying a bucket so there's room for something else." Harlow looked at him, her pale eyes searching his face. "What's in your lunchbox?" The question caught him off guard. "What?" "The lunchbox on your cart. You always have 2 lunches. Who's the second one for?" "My daughter. Bailey. She's in 3rd grade here." Something shifted in her expression. "You make lunch for your daughter. Every morning. What if she doesn't like what you make?" "Then she tells me, and I make something different the next day." Harlow picked up the scrub brush again, her movements slower now. "My mom has a chef. He makes my lunch and packs it in a special thermal container that keeps everything at the right temperature. It always looks perfect, like something from a magazine. But I don't—" She stopped. "I usually just throw it away." They finished cleaning the floor in silence. When the last traces of paint were gone and the water in the bucket had turned a muddy gray, Ray stood and offered her a damp paper towel for her hands. She took it, scrubbing at the paint on her fingers. "Thank you," she said, so quietly he almost missed it. "Any time." She left without another word, her shoes squeaking slightly against the damp floor. Ray watched her go, then went back to his routine, pushing his cart down the empty hallways, while the late afternoon light slanted through the tall windows. Over the next 2 weeks, Ray noticed Harlow more, not because she sought him out, but because once you really saw someone, it was hard to go back to not seeing them. She was always alone. While other students clustered in groups between classes, Harlow walked by herself, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her expression carefully neutral. At lunch, she sat at the end of a table, picking at her magazine-perfect meal before eventually dumping most of it in the trash. She reminded Ray of a feral cat that used to live in the alley behind his apartment building, defensive and quick to lash out, but really just scared and hungry for something it couldn't name. It was Bailey who made the first real connection. Ray was cleaning the cafeteria windows one Thursday afternoon when he saw them in the courtyard. Bailey and 2 of her friends trying to jump rope, and Harlow sitting alone on a bench about 20 feet away, watching. Bailey said something to her friends, then walked over to Harlow. Ray couldn't hear what she said, but he saw Harlow's suspicious expression, the way she shook her head. Bailey persisted, gesturing to the jump rope. And finally, Harlow stood up, her movements reluctant. They jumped rope, or tried to. Both girls were terrible at it, tripping over the rope more than jumping, and after the third failed attempt, they looked at each other and started laughing. Real laughter, the kind that bent them over and made them gasp for air. Ray smiled and went back to his windows. After that, he would see them together more often. Never in the classroom building where the older students might notice, but out in the courtyard during free time or on the playing field after school. Bailey showed Harlow how to play foursquare. Harlow taught Bailey how to braid hair. Simple things, easy things, the kind of childhood moments that should have been unremarkable, but somehow weren't. The change in Harlow was gradual, but undeniable. The tight set of her shoulders loosened. She smiled more, argued with teachers less. She still didn't sit with the other students at lunch, but she stopped throwing her food away. Small victories. Ray didn't intervene. He stayed in the background, doing his job, watching from the periphery the way he always did. But he noticed. He couldn't help but notice. 3 weeks after the paint incident, Ray was mopping the hallway outside the administration office when he heard his name. He looked up to find Headmaster Cunningham standing in his doorway, and beside him, a woman Ray recognized from parent pickup, Mrs. Ashford, president of the PTA and mother of 2 students in Bailey's grade. "Mr. Sullivan, could we have a word?" Cunningham's tone was professionally neutral, but something in his expression made Ray's stomach tighten. He left his cart in the hallway and followed them into the office. Mrs. Ashford closed the door behind them with a soft click that felt ominous. "Mr. Sullivan," Cunningham began, settling into his chair and gesturing for Ray to sit as well. "We've received some reports that have raised concerns." Ray sat. "What kind of concerns?" "Several staff members have noticed that you've been spending time with Harlow Prescott, talking to her, allowing her to help you with your work. She spilled paint in the art room. I showed her how to clean it up." "Yes, well?" Cunningham exchanged a glance with Mrs. Ashford. "We've also heard that your daughter Bailey has been playing with Harlow during free time." "They're friends." Ray kept his voice even. "Is that a problem?" Mrs. Ashford leaned forward, her expression concerned in the way of someone who practiced that expression in front of a mirror. "Mr. Sullivan, we need to be mindful of appearances. Harlow Prescott is a very troubled child from a very prominent family. Her mother has been quite clear about her expectations for how situations involving Harlow should be handled. We have protocols in place, professional boundaries that need to be maintained." "I haven't crossed any boundaries," Ray said. "I helped a kid clean up a mess. My daughter made a friend. Those are normal things. Perhaps normal in other contexts, but Pinnacle Academy has standards." Mrs. Ashford's smile was thin. "We need to be careful that parents don't get the wrong impression. After all, you're in a unique position here, both an employee and a parent. That creates potential complications. The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but clear. Know your place. Stay in your lane. Don't let your daughter reach above her station. Ray felt something hot and sharp rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting angry wouldn't help Bailey. It never helped anyone. I understand, he said, though he didn't. Is there anything else? Just be mindful going forward. Cunningham's tone had shifted to dismissive now that the uncomfortable part was over. That will be all. Ray stood and left the office, closing the door carefully behind him. His hands were shaking. He gripped the mop handle and pushed his cart down the hallway, his jaw so tight it ached. That evening, he told Bailey she needed to be careful about playing with Harlow. He didn't explain why. Didn't tell her about the meeting with Cunningham and Mrs. Ashford. Just said that sometimes grown-ups made things complicated for no good reason. Bailey looked at him with those dark, knowing eyes that saw too much for 8 years old. Because Harlow's rich and we're not. Because people have rules about who belongs with who. And sometimes those rules are stupid, but we still have to live with them. That's not fair. No, sweetheart. It's not. Bailey was quiet for a long time, picking at the edge of her placemat. Can I still be friends with her, when nobody's watching? Ray thought about all the ways he should say no, all the practical, sensible reasons to keep distance between his daughter and the troubled child of a billionaire. All the ways this could go wrong. Yes, he said. You can still be friends. Bailey smiled and went back to her homework, and Ray wondered when exactly he had decided that doing the right thing was more important than playing it safe. The next week, Ray arrived at school to find Catherine Prescott waiting for him in the service hallway. She was leaning against his storage closet door, still in her coat, her phone dark in her hand for once. The sun wasn't even up yet. Miss Prescott. Ray stopped his cart, his mind racing through everything he might have done wrong. Can I help you with something? She studied him for a long moment, her pale eyes unreadable. I want to know what you're doing with my daughter. Ma'am? Don't play stupid with me, Mr. Sullivan. Headmaster Cunningham informed me that you've been interacting with Harlow, that your daughter has been spending time with her. I want to know why. Ray set his jaw. My daughter made a friend. I helped a student clean up a mess. That's all. That's all. Catherine repeated the words as if testing them for lies. You don't want anything? You're not angling for something. A better position, a scholarship for your daughter, a payout to keep quiet about whatever sob story Harlow told you? The accusation landed like a slap. Ray felt his face heat. No, ma'am. I don't want anything from you. Everyone wants something from me, Mr. Sullivan. That's how the world works. So forgive me if I'm skeptical about your altruism. Believe what you want. Ray moved to push past her to his closet. But I'm not interested in playing whatever game you think this is. She caught his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Stay away from my daughter. Ray looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then back up at her face. Or what? Or I'll make sure you and your daughter both find yourselves without a place at this school. Don't think I can't. Don't think I won't. She released his arm and walked away, her heels clicking against the concrete floor of the service hallway. Ray stood there, his heart pounding, until the sound faded, and he was alone again, with the cleaning supplies and the dim fluorescent lights. He should have been intimidated, should have been smart enough to back off, to tell Bailey that playtime with Harlow Prescott was over, to return to his comfortable invisibility. But all he felt was anger and something deeper, a bone-deep certainty that everything Catherine Prescott had just said proved exactly why her daughter was so desperately lonely. Ray went to work. He cleaned the hallways and restocked the bathrooms and polished the brass fixtures until they gleamed. And when he saw Harlow in the courtyard at lunch, sitting on her usual bench, with that careful, neutral expression. He didn't turn away. The breaking point came on a Friday in late October. Ray was cleaning the gymnasium after basketball practice when his phone buzzed in his pocket. Bailey, calling from after-school care. "Dad?" Her voice was tight with tears. "Something happened with Harlow." His chest went cold. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I'm okay, but Harlow ran away. She had a fight with her mom and she just ran. Nobody knows where she is." Ray closed his eyes. Where was she last seen? The front office. But Dad, I think I know where she might be. 20 minutes later, Ray found Harlow exactly where Bailey had guessed, in the small storage room behind the auditorium stage, the one that was supposed to be locked but never was, the one Bailey had shown him once when she was helping him carry supplies. Harlow was curled in the corner behind a stack of old set pieces, her knees pulled to her chest, her face buried in her arms. Ray sat down on a paint-splattered stool near the door, giving her space. "Your mom is looking for you. She's pretty worried." "She's not worried. She's angry." Harlow's voice was muffled. "She's always angry. Parents are allowed to be both. You don't know what she's like. You don't know anything. You're right." "I don't." Ray leaned back against the wall. "But I know what it's like to be scared and alone. And I know that running away and hiding in storage rooms doesn't actually fix anything, even though, sometimes, it feels like the only option." Silence, then barely audible. "She wants to send me away. To boarding school." She had the brochures in her car. Switzerland, just like she threatened. Did she say that's what she was going to do? She didn't have to say it. I saw the brochures. Harlow lifted her head, her face blotchy from crying. "She doesn't want me. She never wanted me. I was just something that happened, and now she's stuck dealing with the consequences." The words were too old for a 10-year-old, borrowed from adult conversations overheard through closed doors. Ray felt something crack in his chest. "I don't know your mom very well," he said carefully, "but I know what I see. And what I see is someone who's scared too. Someone who doesn't know how to fix what's broken between you two, so she keeps trying to throw money and solutions at it, hoping something will stick. That's not an excuse. No, it's not. But maybe it's an explanation." Ray stood and walked closer, crouching down so they were at eye level. "You want to know something true? Your mom came to see me last week. She threatened to get Bailey and me kicked out of this school if I didn't stay away from you." Harlow's eyes widened. "She did? She did. And you know why? Because she's terrified. Terrified that she's losing you and she doesn't know how to stop it. Terrified that a janitor and an 8-year-old girl can make you smile when she can't. That's not about you being bad or broken or unwanted. That's about her not knowing how to be what you need." "Then what am I supposed to do?" The question came out as a sob. "I don't know how to make her see me." "Maybe you stop trying to make her see you and start letting her see who you actually are, even the parts that are messy and sad and angry." Harlow wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. "She doesn't want to see those parts." "Then that's her problem, not yours." Ray stood. "But you still need to let her know you're safe. Come on, I'll walk you to the front office." She hesitated, then slowly unfolded herself and stood. They walked through the empty auditorium, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Ray pushed open the door that led to the main hallway, and there was Catherine Prescott, standing in the middle of the corridor with 3 teachers and the headmaster, her phone pressed to her ear, her face pale. She saw Harlow and went completely still. Then she was moving, crossing the distance between them in seconds, dropping to her knees in front of her daughter. "Oh, thank God," she breathed. "Thank God you're okay." She reached for Harlow, then stopped herself, her hands hovering uncertainly in the air between them. Harlow stood rigid, her expression carefully blank. The moment stretched out, painful and brittle. Then Catherine did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She lowered her hands and just looked at her daughter, really looked at her, with an expression that was raw and undefended. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking on the words. "I'm so sorry, baby." For all of it. Something cracked in Harlow's careful blankness. Her chin trembled. "You have brochures." I know I do." Catherine's voice was thick now. I thought maybe if I found the right place, the right school, the right program, that would fix everything. That would make you happy. But that's not what you need, is it?" Harlow shook her head, tears streaming down her face now. "What do you need? Tell me. Please tell me what you need, because I don't know anymore, and I'm so tired of getting it wrong." The hallway had gone silent. The teachers had backed away, giving them space, but Ray could see them watching, along with Cunningham and several students who had appeared from various classrooms, drawn by the commotion. This was the kind of moment that would be talked about for weeks, dissected and analyzed in whispered conversations. Harlow looked at her mother, then at Ray, then back at her mother. "I need you to have lunch with me," she said, her voice small. "Just lunch. Not catered by a chef or in a restaurant where we have to be perfect. Just lunch, like normal people." Catherine made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Okay, we can do that. We can absolutely do that. And I need you to stop working all the time. I need you to pick me up from school sometimes and not send a driver. I need you to be there, not just your assistance, or your money, or your solutions. Okay. And I need," Harlow's voice cracked, "I need you to stop being disappointed in me all the time. I know I mess up. I know I'm not what you wanted. But I'm trying, and I can't keep trying if you look at me like I'm just another problem you need to solve." Catherine reached out again, and this time she didn't stop. She pulled Harlow into her arms and held on tight, her face buried in her daughter's hair. "You're not a problem," she whispered. "You're not a disappointment. You're my daughter, and I love you, and I've been doing everything wrong because I'm scared, and I don't know how to do this without your father, and I'm so sorry." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the middle of the hallway, while everyone else pretended not to watch. Ray started to back away, to give them privacy, but Catherine looked up and caught his eye. "Mr. Sullivan." She stood slowly, one arm still around Harlow. "Thank you for finding her. She stopped, seeming to struggle with something. "For seeing what I couldn't." Ray nodded. "She just needed someone to listen." "Yes," Catherine's voice was quiet. "I see that now." She turned to Cunningham, who had approached cautiously. "I need to take Harlow home for the rest of the day. We'll be back on Monday." "Of course, Ms. Prescott. Take all the time you need." Catherine looked back at Ray one more time, and in that look was something that might have been respect, or gratitude, or the beginning of understanding. Then she and Harlow walked down the hallway together, Catherine's arm around her daughter's shoulders, Harlow's head leaning slightly toward her mother. Ray watched them go. Behind him, he heard the murmur of conversation starting up again, the normal rhythm of the school day reasserting itself. He returned to his cart and his mop, to the comfortable invisibility of his routine. But something had shifted, something fundamental and irreversible. Over the next few weeks, the change was obvious. Catherine Prescott showed up for parent pickup, not a driver. She attended Harlow's parent-teacher conferences and her school plays. Ray would see them in the parking lot sometimes, sitting in Catherine's car talking, neither of them in a hurry to leave. Harlow still sat alone at lunch, but Bailey joined her now, openly rather than secretly. other students started to drift over, tentative at first, then with more confidence as Harlow proved she wasn't going to bite their heads off. The fierce anger that had defined her started to soften into something gentler, though it never fully disappeared. Ray thought that was probably good. Anger had its place. Could be useful when channeled right. One Monday morning in November, Ray was setting up his cart when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to find Catherine Prescott standing there, holding a coffee cup in each hand. "Good morning, Mr. Sullivan. I brought you coffee. Black, 1 sugar. I hope that's correct." Ray stared at the offered cup. "How did you know? I asked your daughter." Catherine's smile was tentative. "I hope you don't mind. I wanted to thank you properly. And flowers seemed ridiculous for a man, and money seemed insulting given our previous interactions. So I settled on coffee and a conversation. If you have time." Ray took the coffee. It was from the expensive place 3 blocks away, the kind of coffee he couldn't usually justify buying. "I have time." They sat on the bench outside the main entrance, watching the early morning traffic go by. The city was waking up around them, but here, in this small bubble, things were quiet. "I want to offer you a position," Catherine said after a moment. "Not here at the school, at Prescott Industries. We have a facilities management division that could use someone with your skills and work ethic. Better pay, benefits, normal hours. You could actually see your daughter in the evenings." Ray sipped his coffee. "That's generous, but I'm going to say no." She looked at him, surprised. "May I ask why?" "Because I like my job. I like the routine of it, the peace of it. And Bailey likes going to school here. If I worked somewhere else, we'd lose that scholarship. I could arrange—" "No." Ray's voice was firm. "No arrangements. No special treatment. No strings attached." "That's not what this is about." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "Then what is it about, Mr. Sullivan?" "It's about my daughter having a friend. It's about your daughter having someone who listens. It's about doing what's right because it's right, not because there's something in it for me." He looked at her. "Can you understand that?" She smiled, and it was different from her other smiles, less polished, more real. "I'm learning to." They finished their coffee in comfortable silence. When Catherine stood to leave, she paused. "Harlow wants to know if Bailey can come over for dinner sometime. Saturday, if that works. Nothing fancy, just pizza and a movie. Normal people stuff, as she puts it." Ray thought about all the reasons he should say no, all the ways their worlds didn't quite fit together, all the complications that could arise. But he looked at Catherine's hopeful expression and thought about Harlow's fierce eyes and Bailey's easy kindness, and suddenly none of those reasons seemed very important. "Saturday works," he said. Catherine's smile widened. "Good. Thank you, Ray. For everything." She left, and Ray returned to his routine. But as he pushed his cart through the familiar hallways, something was different. He felt lighter somehow, as if a weight he hadn't known he was carrying had been lifted. That Saturday, Ray and Bailey showed up at the Prescott penthouse with a box of cookies Bailey had insisted on baking, even though they looked slightly lopsided, and the chocolate chips were distributed unevenly. The penthouse was everything Ray had expected: floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture that looked uncomfortable, but probably cost a fortune. Art on the walls that he didn't understand, but assumed was important. But what surprised him was the kitchen table, set with paper plates and plastic cups, and the stack of pizza boxes sitting in the middle, steam still rising from the cardboard. Catherine stood there in jeans and a sweater, looking more nervous than Ray had ever seen her. "I wasn't sure what kind of pizza to order," she admitted. "So I got 5 different kinds. Is that too much?" "It's probably too much." "It's perfect," Ray said, and meant it. They ate pizza and watched animated movies on a television that took up most of one wall. Harlow and Bailey sat on the floor, sharing a blanket and trading commentary on the plot holes. Catherine sat on the couch next to Ray, occasionally laughing at the girls' observations, gradually relaxing as the evening wore on. At one point, Catherine leaned over and whispered, "I don't know how to do this. The normal parent thing. I've been winging it my whole life." "We're all winging it," Ray whispered back. "That's the secret nobody tells you." When it was time to leave, Harlow hugged Bailey goodbye with the fierce intensity of someone who had learned what it meant to have a real friend. Catherine walked Ray and Bailey to the door, her hand resting lightly on Harlow's shoulder in a way that looked like it was becoming habit. "Thank you for coming," Catherine said, "for giving us a chance." "Thank you for having us," Ray replied. The next Monday morning, Ray packed 3 lunches: peanut butter and jelly cut into triangles for Bailey, turkey and cheese wrapped in wax paper for himself, and ham and Swiss with honey mustard for Harlow. Cut into squares, because that's how she said sandwiches tasted better. He saw them at lunch, the 3 of them sitting together at a table in the courtyard. Bailey, Harlow, and 2 other girls from their classes. They were laughing about something, heads bent together in that conspiratorial way kids had. Harlow looked up and saw him watching. She waved, and Ray waved back. Catherine Prescott still worked too much. Harlow still had moments where the anger flared up. Bailey still navigated the complicated social dynamics of being a scholarship kid in a school full of inherited wealth. Ray still cleaned the marble floors and emptied the trash cans and remained mostly invisible to the world around him. But every morning, Ray packed 3 lunches, and every afternoon, 3 empty lunch boxes came home. And somehow, in the space between those 2 small rituals, everything had changed. On a cold morning in December, Ray was cleaning the hallway when he heard his name. He looked up to find Harlow standing there, bundled in her winter coat, her backpack slung over one shoulder. It was early, too early for students to be there yet. "Hi, Mr. Sullivan." "Morning, Harlow. You're here early." "Mom had an early meeting. She dropped me off on her way." Harlow shifted her weight from foot to foot. "I wanted to ask you something." "Okay." "How did you know?" She looked at him with those pale gray eyes that saw too much. "That day when you found me behind the stage. How did you know where I was?" Ray leaned on his mop. "Bailey told me. She said if she was scared and needed to hide, that's where she would go. Someplace quiet where nobody would think to look." Harlow nodded slowly. "She gets me. Your daughter. Even though we're really different, she just gets me. That's what friends do." "Yeah." Harlow smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made her look her age instead of older. "I made her something. For Christmas. It's not wrapped yet, but I wanted to show you." She pulled a small leather journal from her backpack, the kind with a clasp and hand-stitched binding. The cover was embossed with 2 names, Bailey and Harlow, intertwined in an elaborate design. "It's a friendship journal," Harlow explained. "We can write back and forth to each other, like passing notes, but better. I designed the cover myself." Ray took the journal carefully, running his thumb over the embossed letters. "She's going to love this." "You think so?" "I know so." Harlow beamed. She took the journal back and tucked it carefully into her backpack. "Thanks, Mr. Sullivan, for everything. For not giving up on me." "I never thought about giving up on you, Harlow. That was never on the table." She hugged him then, quick and fierce, and then she was running down the hallway toward her classroom, her footsteps echoing off the marble floors. Ray watched her go, then returned to his work. The morning light was beginning to filter through the tall windows, painting everything in shades of gold. The building was waking up around him, doors opening, voices echoing, the usual chaos of a school day beginning to build. But for just this moment, in this hallway, everything was quiet. Ray pushed his cart forward, the wheels squeaking slightly. the mop leaving clean streaks across the marble. Same routine, same building, same invisible man doing the same invisible work. Except nothing was the same anymore. And that, Ray thought, was exactly how it should be.